Hello and welcome back to revise GCSE history.co.uk. This is video 7 in the topic medieval medicine, and this video today is actually the last video in the topic. In the video today we're going to be looking at the Black Death, which arrived in Britain in 1348. The Black Death is just the plague, just a special name we give to the plague that struck Britain in 1348, as there was also a plague later which is called the Great Plague. So when we say the Black Death, we're talking about the plague in 1348. The Black Death, the plague, there are two types of plague. There is the bubonic plague, which is spread by black rat flea bites. So black rats carry a flea, and this flea, when it lands on human flesh, it bites them, and this gives them the disease. So the black rats are carriers of these fleas. And the pneumonic plague, which is spread by people breathing or coughing or sneezing germs onto one another. So two types of plague you need to know about. The plague arrived in Britain in 1348, and victims were struck down suddenly, and most of them died. Symptoms included exhaustion, high temperatures, painful swellings, called buboes, severe headaches and difficulty breathing. Ships were made to wait 40 days before landing during the plague, and this is called quarantining. Ships were quarantined. So, what did people think was causing the plague in the Black Death of 1348, and how did they treat it? Well, some people said it was caused by miasma, and when we're talking about miasma, we mean bad air or bad smells. So, if some people thought it was caused by miasma, they treated it by carrying sweet-smelling herbs or sat between two large fires. These sweet-smelling herbs would counterbalance the bad smells that cause a plague and would stop people from getting it. Sitting between two large fires would limit exposure to these bad smells and stop people from getting the plague. Some people thought it was caused by God. That was a supernatural or spiritual belief. And they tried to appease God by praying to him, apologising for their sins, or they became flagellants. And flagellants were people who whipped themselves as a punishment. They whipped themselves publicly to show God that they were sorry for their sins. They thought that by punishing themselves, they would show God that they were sorry for the sins, and they wouldn't need to catch plague, which was thought of as a punishment from God. And this picture here, this source, shows two flagellants publicly whipping themselves with these whips to try and avoid catching the plague. They were showing God that they were sorry for their sins, and they did this by punishing themselves so that God wouldn't punish them by giving them the plague. Another theory was people who believed in the theory of the four humours. They believed their humours were out of balance, and they tried to treat this by using opposites to counterbalance the humours, or by using purging, vomiting or bloodletting. Some people thought that the water had been poisoned, and that's why people were getting the plague, and for this they blamed the Jews. So the Jews were punished for the plague because people thought that they had poisoned the water, so they punished them. Some people also thought that the plague was to do with the position of the stars and planets, and there was no solution to this if they thought the plague was caused this way. So here are a few sources, 3 different sources here, that let us examine the Black Death of 1348. Just bring this one to the front. There we are. So this source here. They went barefoot in procession twice a day in the sight of people, so publicly they walk in barefoot. Their bodies naked, except for linen cloth from loins to ankle. Each wore a hood painted with a red cross at front and back, and carried in his right hand a whip with 3 thongs. Each thong had a knot in it with something sharp, like a needle, stuck through the middle of the knot, and as they walked one after the other, they struck themselves with these whips. 3 times in each procession, they would prostrate themselves on the ground with their arms outstretched in the shape of a cross. And that's from somebody describing people who came to London. So by whipping themselves, they would show God that they were sorry, and God wouldn't give them their plague because they had already apologised for their sins by becoming flagellants. So that is a supernatural belief, believing that the plague was caused by God and it was inflicted as a punishment from God. Here's another source. Terrible is God towards the Son of Men. He often allows plagues, miserable famines, conflicts, wars, and other forms of suffering to arise, and uses them to terrify and torment men, and so drive out their sins, and thus, indeed, the realm of England, because of the growing pride and corruption of its subjects, and their numberless sins, is to be oppressed by the pestilences. So that's from a letter from the Abbey of Christ Church, Canterbury, to the Bishop of London during the plague of 1348. So this source also seems to give the impression that the plague was caused as a punishment from God. God inflicted the plague on people as a punishment for their sins, and this source talks about how the plague is caused. This source here shows the Jews being burned to the stake. Here you can see these people here, they're Jewish people, and they're being lit at the stake, being burnt alive, because they are being punished for poisoning the water. This source is from Germany. As this slide shows, there were many different beliefs as to how the plague was caused and how they treated it based upon this. So that's the end of everything you need to know for this video today. Here are a few quick questions. You may wish to pause the video here, jot down some answers to these questions. If not, carry on watching and we will go through the answers together. How and in what year did the Black Death arrive in Britain? So it arrived in 1348, and although I've not actually explicitly give you the answer to this question during the video, you could probably work it out, and arrived from overseas and it arrived because of the black rats on ships. So black rats on ships from overseas brought the fleas which bit humans and caused the plague to Britain in 1348. What were the two types of plague, and describe how they were spread? Well, the first type of plague was the bubonic plague, and that was actually spread by black rat flea bites. The second type of plague was the pneumonic plague, and that was spread by breathing on people, or you may just want to say coughs and sneezes. Coughs and sneezes. Some people thought that the plague was a punishment from God. Give two ways used to treat it if they thought the plague was caused by this. Well, first would be to pray to God, and the second would be to become a flagellant or publicly whip yourself. Become a flagellant or publicly whip yourself. Okay, so the final question now. Final question of this video. Some thought it was caused by a miasma. Give two ways of treating if they thought it was caused by this. Carry sweet smelling herbs to rid themselves of the bad smells. And the second would be to sit between two large fires. Don't think I'm going to fit that in, so I'll just sit between large fires. Okay, so there are the answers to the quick 4 knowledge recall questions based on the content of this video. Thank you for watching this video today. This is the last video in the topic of medieval medicine. The next videos on my website, in this order, are the videos on medicine in the Renaissance. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.